Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining me again. Now, in the last session, we talked about an overview of the behavioural styles, and in this session, I'm going to talk to you about the dominant and the direct behaviour style. They're super interesting people, but just a quick recap. We talked about behaviours being in 4 key areas, that being dominant and direct, the influencer type, the stabilizers, and also the compliant people who are more your techie detailed people. Now, if you remember, I said to you earlier that only 1% of the population sits in purely one style. And so as we go through and unpack these styles, you'll need to think about where you think maybe you might sit and where you think people might sit that you are dealing with. And then you can kind of get a bit of a feel for some of those combined styles as well. So 99% are a combined style. So we call one particular style, or the dominant style, the captain energy. So we all have a captain energy, and it could be closely followed by another type, and then or maybe we just primarily one captain energy, but we've got a little bit of the other traits in there. So as I said, we're going to talk about the dominant style. Now, dominant people are very direct. They love the big picture. Give them the strategy any day. They're all about the what. What is it? What is it that I need to know? They're very visionary. They're decisive people, and they tend to move pretty fast. D style of people will also take calculated risks. They love to get things done, and they really value action. They also like to control situations, and they absolutely love a challenge. You might even find that they're a little bit competitive. When I'm talking about D behaviour types, let's try and think about who we can relate that to. And so if I was to put some personalities or some characters around that, I would say that people like Arnold Schwarzenegger, most people know who Arnie is. I'll be back. That was a pretty poor impression, but anyway, that'll do. Russell Crowe, he's got that very dominant and direct captain energy. And if you're thinking through even characters of movies, you might think about Harry Potter. If you're a Harry Potter fan, so Harry's that kind of primarily D style. If you love Star Trek, Captain Kirk. Think about the old Captain Kirk. And if you're a Game of Thrones fan, Tywin Lannister is pretty much in that direct or dominant style. So hopefully that'll help give you a bit of a picture. I'm sure as we go through this, you will either think about people who are very much like that, or maybe you're like, maybe you have those behavioural traits yourself. Now, in terms of how you might recognise somebody who is a D style, they can sometimes tend to be in a hurry. You know, they love to get things done, and they're very action focused, and so they're out there and they're doing stuff, and that can sometimes seem like they're in a hurry. You might find that they show up as in I think I mentioned earlier, they're very direct. They say what they think. And sometimes people can deal with that, and other times people find that a little bit hard to deal with. But people who are dominant or direct, as the name suggests, is that they are very direct, and they could occasionally be considered blunt, particularly to people who don't feel comfortable with their level of directness. Now, it's not that they intend to be blunt, but sometimes they can come across as being very blunt. They might come across as being really demanding and impatient. And they could actually, one way you might be able to tell that is they could actually interrupt people. So if you're somebody who tends to talk a little slowly and you like a bit of thinking time, the people with a dominant behaviour trait will start to feel a little bit impatient about that, and particularly if they feel like they're under pressure. They just want you to hurry up and get to the point. So it's not necessarily about you, and if you're presenting in a way that you feel like you can't connect with them or they're just too overbearing, it's not necessarily about you, it's just their style. They don't necessarily even mean to come across as being demanding or too direct or blunt. That's just who they are, and so they're not always thinking about the personality or the emotion or the feeling behind that. That is not because they don't like people, because they absolutely do. And in fact, they love people, but they're wired in a way that has them in that very controlling, task-focused space. So yeah, they might even state their own opinions as facts. And if you're a very compliant style or very detailed style person, you might question that a little bit, because you want to know what's actually behind that. These people can tend to become a little bit dysfunctional, particularly if they're in high pressure situations. Now, a lot of direct and dominant people love high pressure situations, but if they're in a particular situation that gives them stress and it's just too much, sometimes they can come across as overbearing and even rude, and that comes through that level of impatience. It can also come across as them not listening to you, and that's not necessarily the case, and sometimes they don't even recognize that you don't feel that they're not listening to you. So if you're talking to somebody who is dominant or direct and you feel like they're not listening to them, they're not listening to you, I should say, then just let them know, because they might not even necessarily be aware of that. Sometimes they can come across as being really self-centered and even quite aggressive with that as well. Now, if you want to improve performance of a dominant style, whether that's you yourself or whether that's somebody that you are managing, some of the things that you could give them some guidance on and advice around is how to actually slow down and be a little bit more patient, to be present with the person that they're talking to, and particularly to listen to others more. And by listening, you really want to be able to hold the space. So if you're asking a question, hold the space and wait for the answer. And it does take time for people sometimes to think through what they want to say to you, or how they might say it, or you know, how they want to structure it. And so they need a little bit of time just to collect their thoughts. Now, for somebody who's pretty direct, waiting for 20 seconds seems like an eternity, but it's actually not when you're trying to collect your thoughts. And I don't know if you've ever been in a position where somebody asks you a question and you really need to think about it, but then if they come in over the top of you, that can be a little bit disconcerting. So just get them to listen a little bit more and to hold that space, because you really need to be aware of your impact on other people. And so intention and impact can really be quite different. You could intend to be going in to talk to somebody with a purpose of just understanding where a project is at. You know, is it on time? Is it on budget? But if that person isn't in your direct space or direct mindset, that can come across as being a little bit overbearing and maybe bordering on aggressive. If you're working with somebody, and when I say working with, if you're sitting across the table from somebody and you're talking to them about how you can solve their problem, or you want to sell them your product or your service and solve their problem, then, and they're a direct style, then please be aware of that, because if you come in to talk to them and you're going to go through all the detail, they are going to turn off pretty quickly. Now, D styles are generally automatic convincers. So if you've got a solution to a problem that's going to actually achieve their outcome and give them the results they need pretty quickly, that's all they need to know. They don't want to know a detailed history. They don't need to know all of the social proof. They just need to know that it is going to solve their problem and a little bit about how. And if you can give them that information, they are likely to be convinced pretty quickly, and they will make a decision pretty quickly, because these people are very decisive. So if you're giving them a solution to their problem and you're not asking them immediately for the sale or to make a decision on whether they're going to go ahead with it, then you may likely miss out on that sale, because if you don't do it, then somebody else will come in with a solution to the problem and they're going to ask straight away and they're going to get a yes. So don't wait too long if you've got a solution for them. So look, in a nutshell, that is the D style. As you can see, there's a lot of really amazing traits in a D person. And if you're selling to them and you've got what's going to satisfy them, great. They're going to make that decision super quick. That's awesome for you. And if you're a D style, understand your traits and understand the impact that you might have on others, because intention and impact can be a little bit different. I trust that you got a lot out of the session in understanding the dominant and direct behavioural type. In the next session, I'm going to talk about influences. So watch this space. I look forward to catching up with you there. See you soon.